That should have done it. Let me just double check. Yep, it started. All righty, great. So as I mentioned earlier, please make sure that you're muted just to minimize any sort of background noise and distractions. If you have any questions or anything you want to pop into the chat, feel free to do that. We'll get to questions at the end of the presentation. So congratulations. First of all, let's start by saying congratulations. You're the first SALC Capacity Grant cohort, so that's pretty exciting. So as you know, there was a little over $4 million for 20 grants across 33 counties. So that's very exciting. So today our team's going to walk you through the department's capacity process. And I'm also going to pop into the chat a link to the SALC page. So if you want to look to see, there's a link that will show the awardees. So you have a sense of all the different folks that were awarded the grants. So, and then today, let me see, sorry, I'm navigating this newly. There it is, there's the button. So today what we're going to cover is how to enter into the grant agreement, working on the work plan management, work plan management, and then tips for budget and invoice tracking, as well as grant management expectations. And with that, I will hand it over to Artemis Mosier.
Thanks, Melinda. Welcome, everyone. So this flow chart shows the major steps in the process of executing the grant agreement. Our goal is to get these executed between February 15th and the 28th. To that end, please keep the following sequence and time frame in mind for review and approval of the grant agreement. The schedule was also included in your award letter email. So the grant agreement will be sent to the grantees for signature via DocuSign. Grantee will then sign electronically and return the signed grant agreement back to the grant manager before February 15th, who will then initiate the second internal and final routing. The DOC director will then sign, and your grant manager will email you a digital copy of the fully executed grant agreement. So the grant start date, again, ideally is February 28th. We do understand that this is, it can be a little bit more of a complicated process depending on work plans and budgets and things that were flagged at the application stage. So if February 28th is not a realistic start date, that's okay. We're just trying to keep these projects as similar as possible in terms of timing. And also to that end, if you need to get started pretty much now, then work with your grant manager and we'll see if we can try and expedite the process a little bit. But again, it's really dependent on how fast are the negotiations with work plans and budgets and figuring that out. So next step, please. So really what this presentation is, I'm going to highlight work plans, budgets, and invoicing. It seems like those are the three most common areas where there's more confusion or that require more back and forth. So I want everyone to be on the same page right now. This is an example work plan that I made up. If it looks similar to anyone's work plan, it's because I use the three most common tasks, but everything here is 100% made up. So this work plan will be used based on the one that was submitted with the application. Staff may have noted some ineligible activities, some items that require more clarification, or some areas where the total requested in the work plan does not match what is in the budget. The activities listed in the work plan must match what is in the budget. There are differences between the templates in the application versus what we are incorporating into the grant agreement, as we're still developing this program and trying to make the grant agreement, to make the grant and invoicing process as smooth as possible. So the work plan will now include a separate line titled Other Expenses. And this is where you will include any education, training, travel, and indirect costs, totals that will be incorporated. So if you notice indirect costs, it's still going to be broken out by itself, and that is, that's non-negotiable. So So you can delete any of the items not relevant to your grant or add items as appropriate. So if you don't have indirect costs, then that can get deleted. If you don't have education or training, that can get deleted. If you're not asking for mileage, that can get deleted. So this is really just trying to incorporate as many things that are the most common as possible, and then going from there. But really what we care about, I'm sorry, go one more step back. So the grand total at the bottom, this 250, is what's going to be matching the next slide. So next slide, please. So this is an example budget, again, that I made up based on the work plan from the previous slide. So we have also changed the formatting of the budget from the application to allow more flexibility within each task, as well as for ease of invoicing over time. Staff has been combined into one line item, while the staff titles and not to exceed rates are listed in table 2 below. So we highly recommend that you put the anticipated rate over the next 3 years to account for any raises. And next slide, please. This is an example timesheet that I made up based on the activities that we approved in the work plan and the budget. Your timesheet does not need to look like this, but at a minimum needs to include tasks, dates, hours, personnel title, and those not to exceed rates that were listed, and a description of work completed. So again, this is made up. So let's say that task 1 is outreach and task 2 is project development. The timesheet above shows which task is being drawn down from. The date work was completed, the rate of the staff person, which we would cross-reference with the not to exceed rate in the budget, the calculated total, and a brief description of the work completed. When you submit the invoice for reimbursement, since staff is its own line item, you would only need to include the total at the task level. Next slide, please. Sorry, it is really cold in my house. So this is an example invoice chart based on the invoice template that is in the grant agreement. This invoice table here would correlate with the timesheet that was submitted. The detailed timesheet from the previous slide would supplement the chart above. Task 1 staff reimbursement is $480, task 2 is $720. All the numbers should match what was in the budget, the supplemental timesheet, and the work plan. You are in budget as long as the total reimbursement does not exceed what was approved per item and task in the budget. And I guess we'll just do questions at the end and go back. So the expectations that we have are the grantees and grant managers should schedule regular check-ins to ensure the project is on track. Grant managers should be consulted early in the process, especially if a project is going to be developed using this grant funding. The eligibility requirements for SALC capacity project development funds is that the projects developed must meet SALC's acquisition eligibility criteria. So although the grant managers will not do a full eligibility review, a location map, as well as a brief description of the property would be sufficient to start. Some points to remember, grantees must submit all supporting materials and a signed agreement within 6 months of the council award or risk forfeiting the grant award. 6 months from December 15th, 2022, the SGC meeting date takes us into June 2023. So grant managers will work closely with you to meet this time frame. The grant term is 3 years, and it is okay if you complete the grant before the 3-year term is up. Proof of insurance documentation, certification of insurance, noting DOC is additionally insured, must be submitted to the grant manager within 30 days of the grant agreement execution date. Please submit draft invoices to the grant manager for review prior to submission of a signed invoice. Once the draft is approved by the grant manager, you will sign the invoice and send to the grant manager's email, and please CC DLRP invoices at conservation.ca.gov. Please keep in mind that the individual that signs the grant agreement on behalf of the organization will also need to sign the invoices. If you need to delegate this signature authority, then please indicate that in the authorized signatory form of the grant agreement. Lastly, the official start date of the grant agreement is February 28th, 2023, or upon execution of grant agreement by both parties, whichever is later. And publicity. If the grantee chooses to publicize the capacity program for any reason, it is recommended that the grantee coordinate the press release with the department. The department will review the draft press release and ensure that the grantee has included the following: the roles that the department and the Strategic Growth Council have played in the capacity program, specific language as noted in the grant agreement and SALC guidelines. Grantee must name California Climate Investments as the funding source and include the California Climate Investments logo in the publication. Please note that the CCI logo must comply with the usage guidelines. The usage guidelines can be found on the California Climate Investments webpage. And the grantee must also include the email address on the distribution list, as well as post at CA Climate Investments Twitter link on pages that are related to the project. Please let your grant manager know if you intend to publicize your project so that they can coordinate with the appropriate people early in the process. We are also happy to include SGC and DOC director quotes if your draft into your draft press release. And I will open it up for questions. I know that was pretty short. You can unmute, you can put a question in the chat, you can raise your hand using the reactions, raise hand function.
Elena.
Oh,
Alina, I'm sorry.
thanks. As somebody just asked the question I was going to ask, I had trouble logging on, and so I missed the first 10 minutes of the presentation. I was hoping that
Yes,
there would be a link sent out.
There will be.
Okay.
We'll send a link and also a copy of the slides.
Wonderful. Thank you.
You're welcome. Yes. We'll be sending a PDF of the PowerPoint.
Eric.
Thanks, and thanks so much for this presentation. Artemis, could you explain a little bit more about what you said on the budget for rates not to exceed and the anticipated rate having some space for any raises? Is that related to the staff hours over the 3-year grant term and just making sure that we're billing at what that staff rate is going to be over the full grant term? Am I interpreting that right?
Yeah, so Melinda, can you please go back to the grant agreement budget detail? So we are currently in 2023. So if you look at the bottom of this table, table 2 rates detail, let's just stop at the executive director line right here. It's $100. So in 2023, the executive director hourly rate is, let's just say $90. Okay. So as the years go on, if it's a 3-year grant term, the executive director rate would then be $100 anticipated in 2026. So as long as you're not exceeding that $100 over the next 3 years, then we can go ahead and bill that. What we don't want to happen and what we typically see is that, let's say the executive director hourly rate 2023 is $90, and then we get a request for an amendment to increase the hourly rate, and it's just, we've been getting a lot of pushback from that. So we would like to try and anticipate the rates over the grant term and go from there. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, that's very helpful. Thanks so much.
No problem. I see projects.
Yeah, this is Douglas from the North Coast Regional Land Trust. I had a question on filling out the invoices for match funds. Would we line out match funding the same way that you would for these grant funds in those invoices?
That's an excellent question. Is Shauna on the call?
Nope.
Okay, cool. So I'm gonna make it up. No, match funding isn't required. So we don't necessarily have a space for it in the invoice. What I would do is maybe as a supplemental, then you can go ahead and add a page and show where the match is being drawn down from, especially if it was, if you had match listed for like an acquisition, and we're paying for your associated costs, then you can list it somewhere else. But on the main invoice template that's in the grant agreement, I wouldn't put anything there.
Okay.
And Kelly.
Thanks. Kelly, yep.
Hi, thank you. Kelly Hopkins with the Sacramento Valley Conservancy. I'm curious to follow up on the previous question on that rate. So we're going to use the 2025 anticipated rate, and is that a billable rate or is that the hourly rate?
That is I think it's the billable rate.
The fully encumbered rate.
The fully encumbered rate.
And you can invoice, you can always, so you can invoice for less, but you can't invoice for more, I think, as Artemis was saying too. So, we'd need to see that documentation to show the rate, the fully encumbered rate.
Okay, thank you.
Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
Cool.
Janet.
Hi, can you go to the slide that's right prior to this one? I think is the one that has the invoicing.
This one, the work plan, or maybe the after? This one?
That one, the one after, not that one, the one before that.
Okay,
This
time
one.
sheet.
So we use an electronic time tracker that doesn't quite go to this level of detail. It's based on the work plan that shows just the generic, like project management and stuff like that. So will that be sufficient, or do you need more detail in the description of the invoice?
We would need a little bit more of a description. Electronic trackers absolutely are okay. This is just, at a minimum what we would need. In those invoices, there's also a breakdown of work completed per task for that invoice. So that's a space where you can get into a lot of detail. But if you're going to be invoicing us monthly or quarterly, then we do need to see where the funds are going and how it's being spent.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And Kelly, did you have another question? Or hand still up?
Sorry about that.
No problem.
How to take it down.
And again, as these questions come up, you'll be working with your grant manager, so you'll check in with them on things. Every organization is a little bit different in the way that they do their time tracking and all the other stuff. So we realize that they're individual, different types of scenarios.
Great. Any projects?
Yeah, I was wondering if I think we talked earlier about consultants, for doing certain tasks were not an eligible cost. I was trying to find it real quick here in the guidelines. But I was wondering if like a videographer for like a webinar to post online, if that would be an eligible cost for, like, if that would be a contractor.
So consultants are eligible. It depends what the consultant would be used for, but they are an eligible cost. For posting hiring a videographer, that's an
And would that be what
I
would
think
be?
it depends.
Yeah.
So it's basically not hiring someone to do, we're doing an outreach component, not hiring someone to conduct the outreach, but essentially just man the equipment to do the recording, like a professional recording. So we're not using our cell phones or something. I guess that was kind of the distinction. We're hoping we could get somebody to contract to do that rather than do our own videography, if that would be an eligible cost.
I think it would be. Let's talk. I believe I'm your grant manager as well.
Yeah,
So we can go ahead and take a look at the work plan and see how you have that broken out. But I don't see why that would be a problem.
Okay, great.
Yeah, we'd also want to just look at the, how much of your grant would be going towards something like that.
Yeah, for this example, it would be probably just a one-off because we were going to have a web-based recorded component to the outreach. And so it would be, in the first year, probably just do this recording, a more professional video to have on our website or YouTube.
Yeah, that sounds like it should be fine, but we can definitely talk as we put together as we discuss the work plan and the budget and see where we can fit everything in.
Great, thanks.
Mhm. Okay. We can probably leave it open for 5-10 more minutes. And then if you guys have any more specific questions, then feel free to reach out to your grant manager. You should be receiving draft grant agreements soon. If you haven't already, draft budgets with this updated template were sent with the award letters with comments on the sides, either noting things that require more clarification or ineligible costs and ways to reallocate those funds. So I think that's it, unless there's any other questions.
And thanks everybody for joining us today. If you have sunshine, you can go out and take a little walk now. You've got some time back.
Hopefully this was not confusing.
Thanks, you guys. Thanks, everybody.
And I think, Melinda, you can probably stop recording.